What makes the achievement of emotional sobriety so difficult is the habits we have, the patterns we have in our behavior, the habitual ways that we've come to think about things. We have to really become aware of those things in order to challenge them, because the consciousness that has created a lot of the problems in our life cannot solve it, cannot change things. So what happens is the first step is waking up. How do working the steps impact self-esteem? Now, self-esteem is essential for emotional sobriety. We will be talking about that more and more later, but you'll hear it in our discussions, is that all of the elements of self-esteem are also elements of emotional sobriety. Now, one of the ways that we've been looking at the steps is using Dr. Brandon's 6 pillars, and Herb so thoughtfully reminded us that there's actually 7 pillars of self-esteem that Dr. Brandon summarized after many, many years of research with self-esteem. And just as a reminder, these are living consciously is the first pillar. The second one is self-acceptance. The third pillar is self-responsibility. The fourth is self-assertiveness. 5 is living purposefully. Number 6 is personal integrity, living with personal integrity. And the 7th one is a willingness to practice and to really, really try these things on. Now, he talked about these pillars as really a practice that we bring to our life. And we've been looking at step 1, right? We admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. And I've talked to you that this was the beginning of a new consciousness, the development of a new consciousness. Up to this point, we couldn't imagine how accepting powerlessness could be a positive thing. You see, the consciousness we had before taking this step and being brought to this step was such that being powerless was a terrible thing. Bill said every instinct, every natural instinct cries out against the acceptance of this fact, because in our mind, that was something that was unacceptable. That wasn't going to help us become what we could be. It was going to actually subtract from our self-esteem. Well, those of us that have taken this step realize that there's nothing farther from the truth. The acceptance of our powerlessness starts to create what we called the beginning of an alignment with reality, an alignment with who we are and what is true about us. So it turns out the opposite is true, and I think a lot of you have probably experienced that, is ideas and beliefs that you once held and thought were so important in your life, you've discovered you had things backwards, that's not the case. That really owning who we are and seeing who we are starts to open the door to change. I like what Roger finished off the discussion last week, was that self-acceptance is a precondition for change. So important to think of it this way. So what we're going to continue to talk about tonight is step 1 as we continue this exploration. And I'll just remind you of a few things. That last week I talked about this concept from Dr. Brandon that acceptance was more than simply to acknowledge or admit something. He described it as an experience of standing in the presence of this reality, of contemplating the reality, and really, really thinking about and feeling what it means for you in your life today to accept your powerlessness. It's to absorb that reality into our consciousness. So this self-acceptance becomes a very, very important thing. It's also, right, activating that other pillar that he talked about, living consciously. Now we are now challenged some of the consciousness that created our problems in the first place, and we're now opening our eyes to new possibilities. It's one of the ways I love thinking about emotional sobriety. It's really the discovery of new possibilities in our life, new possibilities in our relationship with ourself, and most importantly, new possibilities in relationship with reality. Dr. Brandon went on to describe that self-esteem is living responsibly towards reality. You see, when we align ourselves with reality, then one of the components of self-esteem is self-efficacy. We start to develop a self-confidence. We start to see that we can handle situations in ways that we couldn't handle them before. Well, when we're aligned with reality and we let reality control us, meaning control us to the degree that it's our job to find the best response to our reality, and those of us in the program, we found the best response is to commit ourselves to this journey. If we are willing to go to any lengths. And that's the truth about our recovery. It's the truth about self-esteem, and it's the truth about emotional sobriety. So I just wanted to kind of once again remind us of the context. Let me invite my colleagues into the room with me, and let's see what they want to continue to share with us about self-esteem and step one. Roger?
Thank you, Alan. I appreciate your kind words. Hey, Thom.
Hey.
Is Herb with us tonight? There you are, Herb. Good to see you. Very good to see you.
Well, we can see him, but we don't know whether he's with us tonight or not.
Oh, stop. All right. So
he got it.
I know. I just want to expand a little bit on what Alan was talking about. I had mentioned two primary dimensions or aspects to Dr. Brandon's definition of self-esteem. The first was self-respect, which includes and encompasses a sense of self-worth. And the second was the development of self-confidence, what Alan just referred to and Dr. Brandon often refers to as self-efficacy. Efficacy is our sense of being able to be effective, right? Being able to accomplish things we wish to accomplish, make a difference that we want to make in the world, and so on. Or an effectiveness with specific tasks or skills that we have. So when I think about step one and its emphasis on powerlessness, there does seem to be this contradiction. As Bill W. said, you come to the program and thinking it will build an experience of self-confidence, right? It'll increase a feeling of self-confidence. And my sense is it does for so many clients that I've worked with, but not in a direct way, right? In an indirect way. It's a paradoxical way because, as Alan said, it encompasses and involves this idea of surrender. And who among us has a positive notion of surrender, right? Surrender means defeat. Surrender means I lost or we lost, my side lost. So it's really very, very confusing, I think. This, all the literature on emotional sobriety, including Alan's books and other contributions, to me, there are lots of, I'll use the polite word, the kind word, which is paradoxes. You can also see them as a lot of contradictions in this, but they are contradictions that are meaningful. They're contradictions that are important. And this is one of the most important. How do I adopt an attitude of powerlessness, move out of my ego with a capital E, and my need to inflate my sense of self-importance, which again, Dr. Brandon refers to as pseudo self-esteem, fake self-esteem, rather than genuine self-esteem. And that's, to me, that's one of the keys of step one, is it offers a pathway to liberation from what Alan has often called my false self, to begin to come into my true self. But beyond that, even when I come into my true self and I'm get connected to what I want and what I would like to have happen, and skills I want to gain, knowledge I want to gain, things I want to accomplish, there's this other aspect I need to consider, which is, what's the reality of the situation I am in? What's the context that I am in? Because just because I'm connected to my authentic self doesn't mean I'm going to be able to fly by flapping my arms really fast. Okay. It doesn't mean I'm going to be able to love in the ways I would most like to be able to love. So there's this amalgam, this combination of letting go of my ego with a capital E, letting go of my false self, focusing. Somebody in the group last time, or a few meetings ago actually, mentioned, well, part of what the program says about self-esteem is you gain self-esteem through what? Through engaging in estimable acts, estimable behavior, right? And that is a big part of self-esteem. All of these concepts and principles and practices, which Alan emphasized, that Dr. Brandon talks about, they still need to be translated into action. That's why he refers to them as practices, not just principles. They still need to be engaged in. And I need to approach them with one eye on my personal wants and needs, one eye on another eye on the needs and wants of people around me, and a third eye, if I have one, on what's the context that I'm operating in? What are the realities that I'm up against? One of those might be that I'm going to need help to accomplish certain things I want to accomplish, right? So I can ignore that, or I can, if it's hard for me to ask for help, like it is for many of us, I can slowly, Dr. Brandon has this idea of 5% progress a week or 5% progress a day, not 100% progress. I can begin to learn what I need to learn to be able to ask for help more easily. Why? Because that is the reality that I've come to see about accomplishing certain things I need to accomplish. They need to be in relationship or in community. So the idea of powerless to me, is applied to self-esteem, is a liberation from ego, and it's a step into humility. It's a step into the sense, and this is another paradox. In some ways, I think the less we mind trip or think about self-esteem, and I'm not encouraging us not to do that, but the less I think about self-esteem, and the more I focus on estimable acts, as I said a while ago, the more I think about overcoming fears, my fears, the more I think about connecting to other people in ways that are meaningful for both them and me. I haven't thought about my self-esteem in any of those actions, but my self-esteem has risen with every one of them. So that's the sense in which I mean, thinking about self-esteem involves a lot more than thinking about self-esteem. It involves taking action to help grow it inside ourselves. So I turn it over to you guys.
Thanks, Raj.
Sure.
Thom, why don't you jump in and we'll let her be the cleanup hitter today.
All right. I feel like I'm crashing a party. I've been gone so long. It's I'm glad to talk after Roger, because you said some things that that I can respond to, and if Herb talked next, then I'd be confused about whether I wanted to respond to what Herb said. You know how that goes. I know Roger does, because we've talked about it. It's like you go like, oh hell, I was going to talk about that, but now I want to talk about this. This is very specific about some clients I'm working with right now that are fairly new at whatever it is that we're embarking on, as far as what the practices are going to be, and what the recovery from and what the recovery of is going to be. And and I think when I think about it in terms of powerlessness, I think we have to realize that we're powerless over the fact that we are we are so ingrained in our old way of thinking, the way that we've thought for years and years. I mean, this is like, these are well-worn paths. I mean, these are hell, these are interstates. You know, it's like, you know, if you take off and say, like, if we go out and back of my house here and take a walk, we don't talk about where we're going to walk because the paths are very clear. My wife has cleared out these paths. The measure of whether it's a good path or not is if I can find my way home. And so we just start walking, but we're talking about blazing new paths here. And so what that means is that what we're going to be doing is we're going to be recognizing that our old way of thinking or old ways of thinking have not worked. And so talk about paradox, talk about the turnaround. It's like, so what we're really talking about that's going to take us to humility is we're going to need to start learning some things that we not only, you know, are not very good at, we suck at it. It's horrible. It's like we don't know how to do something. And it's like, we don't like that. You know, most of us I just don't like doing that. It's like, I like to do something that I can immediately feel good about. But you talk about self-confidence. When you talked about that, what I have thought and talked to people about for years is, you know, you don't just get self-confidence. You have to have, that needs to be based on competence. And in order to have competence, practice. You have to repeatedly practice this stuff. And it's not just a new idea or whatever, but it's really is getting that practice that's going to be your practice. Not just taking what I say or what any of you guys tell the people you're working with, but finding out what your practice is going to be. That takes some time. And I think in the meantime, what I'll say to people sometimes is here's a place where you can have some confidence in the meantime, before you have enough competence to feel confident in your recovery practice. And that is, take my word for it and feel confident in the fact that you're being really gutsy, that you really have a lot of courage to do this work, you know, to dive into the deep end of this shit, you know, and to you know, it's one thing turning your will and your life over to a higher power. It's another thing turning some of your will and your life over to us. You know, it's like, trust me. I'm saying to some of my clients, trust me on this. I'm telling you something that I think is really going to work for you. And that takes a lot of guts to do that. So I just want people to, because I guess the summary point to me is the idea that you get to have confidence when you have competence, and in order to have competence, you have to do the work. And what we do in recovery is we do the work, and then we do it again, and then we do it again, and then we do it. You know, so when people say, "When is it done?" You go like, "Got me." You know, I'm still working, I'm still practicing it, but I feel confident about, you know, not arrogantly confident, but I feel confident about the fact that my day, you know, I can actually describe to you my daily practice at any given time, and it'll vary. You know, check with me in 2 months, and it may be different than it is now, but that I have actual practices that can be measured, and that's going to lead to confidence. That's going to lead to self-esteem. And the last thing I'll say, based on something you said, Roger, also is remember, most good insights are going to come with hindsight. You're not going to know when you hit self-esteem. Oh, there it is. I'm there. You know, what you're going to do is you're going to be having a conversation, and you're going to look back and go like, you know what? The last few weeks, I haven't really been beating the holy crap out of myself. You know, and that's where it comes. Those awarenesses come with hindsight. So, and I think one of the big lies that we have in our whole culture is that our conscious mind has to be running the whole damn show. It's like, it doesn't. You know, just do the work, do the practice. It's like it will come. And I get reinforced with that in my own life. I get reinforced with that by talking to my clients. I had a client not too long ago that had said, "Hey, I had this experience in my thinking that was really different, and I didn't do anything to make it happen. I just noticed it happen." It's like, well, you did it. You did do something to make it happen, and that's because you've been practicing.
Wow.
Yeah.
I like that so much, Thom.
Yeah.
There's a famous psychotherapist named Milton Erickson, who's been deceased for several decades now, but he was a very famous hypnotic therapist, as well as a more conventional therapist. And he absolutely loved it when his clients would just find that they had changed, when the change process had occurred at a subconscious level. If you ask them why they changed, they don't know. but he would also have assigned them all these crazy behavioral assignments and actions. And that was the root, that practice, as you're talking about, was the root of those changes. So we don't have to have all the answers to why. And I
that's a
agree
great
with
example with Erickson, because you definitely couldn't possibly understand what you were doing. I mean, it's like, because he used confusion as much as he used anything, even to induce trance. So yeah, that's a great example.
Yeah. And hindsight, that's it. We can understand better what's happened when we look back at it. I saw you nodding with that idea, with a lot of ideas there, Herb. So what do you have to say tonight, Herb?
Thank you so much. Yeah, you asked that question again. My answer is so I've got the next 2 hours, right? Oh my
I guess
goodness.
we'll have to do a workshop on this at some point with everybody.
You guys just press my button, and I've got 4 different sheets of notes here. Kind of like, first of all, Thom, my only real experience is in the rearview mirror. When I look back over my shoulder, I go, oh, and something comes together. It's just like, that's absolutely consistent experience for me. And Roger, you mentioned Erickson. I'm not familiar with it, but the why and the what. Why is interesting. It's just not relevant in the real sense, practical. What is really practical? What actions can I take? I mean, and that's y'all had shared that. It's about the actions. It's not about knowing what self-esteem is. And then, no, it's about taking the actions and then experiencing it at some point. One of the things I want to really stress, because you guys are all trained and certified psychologists and therapists, is like, this is not the steps. This is not self-help. I'm going to pause for just a minute. This is not self-help. The whole premise and assumption of the 12-step process is we're hopeless and helpless. And that once and the real word is in the book, not admit, but concede. Concede to our innermost self. That's that acceptance. I'm screwed. Because my history shows me that, both in addiction and in managing my own life. And one of the breakthroughs that I had, because I never had any problem with a whole lot of things, but I was 10 years sober when a man introduced me to the set-aside attitude and prayer. Because I come from a spiritual background and lots of information and some psychology and therapy and that kind of thing. And this man said to me, and you've probably seen me do this, he said, you have a lot of information, Herb, but you have very little transformation. Because you haven't applied what you understand to your experience, to your feet, to your action, and therefore your heart's not been changed. And it was about setting aside my old ideas, because what I discovered was that my knowledge, my experience, my prejudice in a healthy sense, my prejudice was the very impediment to my relationship, both with myself and to life itself. You use the term very generously about practice, both of you, and I know that there's a book in there. Life is a practice. Life itself is a practice. And relating it to the 6 pillars, 7 pillars, is I just did a quick little review, and the first pillar is consciousness, but that 7th pillar that he sort of wraps in the back of the book is about willingness. It's about the use of my willpower to take action. The 2 things that make us specifically human is the ability to think, that we have the ability to know that we know. That's that consciousness. And that we have the ability to make a decision. I saw something the other day, and going over my notes today just so that we could have some conversation. It was all in the notes, but this phrase really startled me because I had never seen it before. The true expression of free will for a human being is the ability of willingness. The ability, and then the man who took me through the steps said, because I was resisting and I was balking, not unconsciously, but my feet weren't moving. He said, I said, oh, I'm willing, I just don't have time. He said, willingness without action is fantasy. I mean, he was such a hard ass.
I love that.
Willingness without action is fantasy. Well, that's that seventh pillar, willingness, the use of my free will to choose to be willing. And I know, at least in my experience, that even the willingness itself is a grace. I mean, that's my terminology for it, because I really do believe I'm hopeless and helpless on my own, and I can want to be willing, but I can't be willing in the truest sense that I'm going to implement action that's going to literally be effective in changing my life. So there's that mystery between willingness and grace, and I've talked about that before, maybe not here, but it's a mystery. I don't understand it, and that's not a cop-out. I can observe it. I don't have to understand it. I can observe it, and this is my explanation of it. I was willing to be taken, but I was taken to a place of willingness. I was willing to be taken. That's my role. But I was taken to a place of willingness. That's where the mystery is. I can't explain it, but I can observe it. And the litmus test of willingness is the action that I take. If I only say or feel that I'm willing, I'm probably not. But if in fact you hear the knock on the door or my feet are moving, I'm probably really willing, because I'm taking it. Thanks.
I hear a lot of people criticize the 12 steps, that they're old-fashioned. I can understand that criticism. They were written back in 1935. Some people that are agnostic have difficulty with the word God used in the steps. For me, I look at the process that's involved. The forces that the 12 steps generate are so powerful that I think they're ageless. There's this interesting phenomena that happens when you work the steps. They create a charge and then a discharge. You know, the first step, we're powerless. Our life has become unmanageable. It creates this charge. You know, we're in big trouble and we don't know what to do. And then step 2 comes along and it says we have hope. That charge, that existential crisis that we have is resolved. What's happening here is parallel to life. We charge ourselves when we breathe in. When we exhale, we discharge. That's the rhythm of life. And the way I love to think about the 12 steps, it's helping us get connected to the rhythm of life so we can learn how to show up in a good way.